Good morning. I'm Hugh Burrows. Welcome to Mosaic at this end of the year, beginning of the new year. Our host, Ron Swisher, Reverend Ron Swisher of Community United Methodist Church in Fairfield is with us. We thought we'd take this opportunity to interview Ron for a change. And to begin with, what do you see are the top religious stories as you're looking back on 2013, Ron?
Well, you know, it's so many of them, but I think what stood out for me was Nelson Mandela's death and what he represented. Time magazine captured him as being the person who was the protester, the prisoner, and then the peacemaker. And I think, you know, after spending 27 years in prison, we all know about that. But the idea of coming out, and I think people expected violence and expected war and revolution, and they got reconciliation and peace and forgiveness, especially those who had imprisoned him. So I think that's major when we talk about forgiveness as being so essential to our faith, and he's practicing it. I think that's very impactful for not just the church and the Christian church, but the world. So I think he's one great example.
Mandela, the #1 story of 2013.
I think that, to me, is, as I look at it, is make that assessment, it would be Mandela. And then I'd say Pope Francis. Time magazine just last week chose him as the person of the year because he's in the center of all the major conversations of our time. Conversations about wealth and poverty, about fairness and justice, about transparency and technology, about globalization, the role of women, the nature of marriage, the temptations of power. You know, here's a man comes along, doesn't have weapons of mass destruction, doesn't have that kind of power in that sense, but he has tremendous power. Every time he tweets, the world looks at it. You know, he just has that kind of influence.
And what's your sense of that time? Are you optimistic that he's going to move what we might consider positively on all those issues?
I'm very hopeful. I think that some of the theology and the philosophy is going to be a challenge. But it seems like he's the kind of person who wants to be engaged and involved and be in the center of addressing that. He sees the church, as he puts the emphasis on poverty, he says he sees the church out there dirty, bruised, hurting in the world instead of behind comfortable walls. So I think he might be the one who breaks down some of the walls of gender and sexuality, and especially class, since he puts so much emphasis on the poor.
The first Jesuit pope. Any
first
thoughts on
Jesuit,
that?
and I'm crazy about that because I went to Jesuit schools, and University of San Francisco, and I was trained by the Jesuits, and so I said,
well, who are they? Who are these Jesuits?
Well, Jesuits are considered the great educators. They go back hundreds of years, putting a lot of emphasis on education. They believe they're the ones who educated people in the faith and a lot of, you know, trained. It takes a long time to be a Jesuit. I think the average Jesuit is in their 30s after years of schooling and training. I took primarily theology and scripture from them, and I was always impressed with their, in fact, one of the teachers taught me Greek for 2 years, and he gave me a recommendation to go into seminary at Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, and was going to come to my ordination, but he got sick. So I have
Jesuits, rigorous in their training.
Rigorous, and I have a tremendous respect for them.
Constituted to go fight Presbyterians, but that's another story. That's another story. Okay, so Mandela and the new Pope, two big stories of 2013. What else?
I would say also you have to look at the gay marriage. Even though 16 states, I think, have approved gay marriage now, you have gay unions. But the church still resists on the whole. I mean, some churches are very open, but some churches like ours is almost split around it. We, for 40 years, have dealt with the issue of homosexuality. We say homosexuality is not compatible with the Christian faith, and yet when it comes to justice, I think it's a justice issue, whether you agree with homosexuality or not. I think it's a justice, fairness issue. Are you going to allow people to have the same rights as heterosexuals? And I think that's the issue. And some of us in the church still are against that, unfortunately, I think. And we have recently had pastors defrocked, their orders taken from them. One of my former bishops, Bishop Talbot, he performed a union, and now he's under fire because of it. even though he's retired, they're still talking about he's splitting the church and he's bringing great harm to our church. But I think all the denominations, your Presbyterians, Lutherans, all the Episcopalians are dealing with it, and it's still a major issue.
Let's hold for a moment, and we'll come back, pick up just there, talk more about gay, lesbian, and marriage and that kind of thing with Ron Swisher when we come back. Stay with us.